Well, hello everybody. I know a lot of you are still coming in. Good morning to those of you in the U.S. And good day to wherever you are, anywhere in the world. Welcome to the Hamilton design discussion with Team Lighting. My name is Nick Gonsman. I'm a field project coordinator here at ETC. We just released the Hamilton project, which this lovely team helped put together. And so that's sort of the impetus for this event. Joining me from ETC, my co-host, if you watch any other EOS events, Rob Crane, FPC out of Dallas. Also joining us are Lowell Alcott and Ann Valentino, who are product managers for Augmented and EOS respectively. So they are here for any EOS or Augmented related questions should they come up. So thanks for joining me, ETC gang. That brings us to our fine friends and panelists. The lighting designer extraordinaire, Mr. Howell Binkley. Thank you so much for taking time to join us. It's good to see you.
Absolutely.
Associate, Mr. Ryan O'Gara. Thanks again for coming in. Good to see you. Assistant lighting designer on Hamilton, Amanda. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us from the West Coast.
Hi.
And programmer to the stars, Mr. David Arch. Good to see you.
Dave, thanks.
Coming in from Brooklyn. So today we want to talk about Cats, the musical. No, I'm kidding. We're here to talk about Hamilton. As many of you know, Hamilton has been on Broadway for a few years. Has spawned several companies of touring. And I'd like to just sort of have an open discussion about what it means to bring a Broadway show forward. What sort of logistics are there? What sort of artistic decisions went into this particular show? And just sort of go through that. So we'll also be taking your questions. Rob Crane is manning the phone lines, so bless him for that task. So yeah, pop in a question to the Q&A, and we'll get to it as soon as we can. If you were interested in seeing not just speaker view but tile view, in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you have the ability to change between speaker view and tile view. And again, this is going to be recorded, so anybody who misses this or wants to go back and re-review, usually takes us about a day or two to get these events processed once they are recorded and up on YouTube, and that's going to be at ETC Study Hall. So I guess I just want to open it up for discussion. Hamilton, getting involved, where did it start? How did you get signed on? What's that story?
Well, it's been a fascinating journey, I think, for all of us doing Hamilton. The original, the reason I think we were all invited into Hamilton is because of our relationship with Tommy, Cale, and Lynn from In the Heights. So I had quite a long, lengthy journey through that on Broadway and as well on the tours where Ryan joined me on the tours. So, and then, so we all had kind of a working relationship going into the show and working on a new project. You know, we kind of had a instinctive vocabulary that was kind of a unspoken thing that really was quite helpful. That just takes time to, as most designers and associates and programmers all develop through the course of just working on shows. So then Ham came up, and I had a couple of readings that I went to before Amanda and Ryan came in, and there was even a partial book in it, and the thing was about 3 days long, you know, and it's really, they had a lot of work to do. But they did, and they were smart about every decision that they made, about what to cut, what to keep, how to translate. And what was very fortunate with Tommy and Lynn and Alex and Andy is they put together this small group that kind of ended up staying, that ended up really being the original cast of the show. I mean, who could have written that? You know, that was a very special thing, not only for them, but for us, but for the show. You know, just having that weave of everybody being so tight, knowing everybody. So then, jumping ahead, we got a green light to go into the public, into the Newman. I believe it's 300 seats, maybe more. Grid height, maybe pipes at 17 feet. I could be wrong, off by a foot or two, but pretty much a fixed black box. And Corns did a very unique thing since we on a very low budget. He just used the walls of the theater and built into it. I mean, the brick walls are the walls from the public. The columns, they stayed there and they were part of the set. So that was great. And so we had some studio spots and a small rig and off we went.
That's amazing. Downtown, low budget, like, I imagine that the impetus was to get backers and financing to move it, to grow it. What sort of, I guess, what do you use for sort of foresight or a crystal ball for, the design decisions that you make that presumably you're going to have to live with or want to live with? What is that like when you sort of see something that may have a life from this 17-foot grid brick wall theater downtown?
Well, one thing I forgot to leave out, we also had two source boards on a stick. So that was really, that just tells you all right there, which we were fortunate enough to know that if the show ever moved, we would get 3 bottom spots, and the producers gave us their blessing on that. So we were very lucky there. It was an education for us all going into it. I mean, we had to redevelop the story in this room, and it's just we started from page 1 and we teched the hell out of the show for 10 days, and then we did our first invited dress, and I think at that point we all knew that we really had something in our pocket that was really we could really work on. Is during that invited dress. I mean, we had been working endlessly just to get the show on the board, just to put get transitions roughed in. But Tommy, the director, was very cool about saying, let's get the show in, then we'll make a laundry list each night and go through that the next day and really hit the priorities that we need to hit, clean them up, and then, we'll just keep carving into the show to get things suitable for everybody. So that again comes to having a great team. Having a fantastic director. I was blessed with, having the team that I have right here. We all had our work cut out for us, and we came in every day and just went to town. It was a joy, as was when we got the word that the show was going to move. As scary as it was to hear, oh my God, it's going to move to a real theater. What are we going to do? And but anyway, I'm just babbling now.
No, it's amazing. And I Ryan, I'm interested in your take as well. How do you, with those sorts of changes coming in so quickly, with sort of a design process that feels like it's very layered, right? Going pass over pass over pass. How are you keeping track of all of that? How are you making sure that all of that is documented well, that other teams are being communicated with? What is the workflow for like supporting this thing that is evolving so quickly and moving forward?
Well, I mean, the one thing that Hal said, it was an amazing team. So every department, scenery, costume, sound, are all amazing collaborators and friends. And whenever it was an obstacle, we had to put a light and a speaker or something in the same spot. We all worked together, and it was the benefit of the show. And that is always hard to find sometimes, but that was what was great about everybody on Hamilton is we all worked together for what was going to make the best position options for the show. And even when we take it on the road and there's different obstacles, it's a group effort where we're all just, okay, can we do this and this? And it's always collaborative ideas of how we can all make the best product on that stage. And I think that's made it so easy because everybody was just like, here's our problem. Here's our solution. Do you have a better solution? And we work all together. And even what Howell's saying, there's the downtown we had 2 fall spots on a stick, source 4s on a stick that couldn't hit the second level. So
we had IQs.
Right.
yeah, we had IQ mirrors throughout that we would figure out and do the pickups. And you know, so the transfer from downtown to Broadway, you know, we had the core idea, but then it was solving a lot of the problems downtown. And you know, even in the pre-production going into the public, you know, it was you know, it was amazing where we got to with that rig and that plot. I mean, it was. We used everything, and you know, the crew was wonderful. We're like, hey, we want to add this idea, and they were all really supportive. And Hal was like, I want these streets, and we created these beautiful par streets underneath the platforms. It was like gorgeous ideas that, you know, downtown allowed us all to just create, and there was not any roadblocks of budget or no's. It was all like, okay, how do we all work together to make that happen? That's an awesome idea. You know,
Well, it's like the handmade templates for the turntable.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because this is something that David and I were talking a lot about when we were working on the programming project that we put out. You know, I'm interested to know the story of the templates, right? You know, having a turntable on a set is difficult, right? Because lights don't generally do that, you know, right? They don't sort of wrap nicely around round objects in that way. And especially with, you know, a lower ceiling and things like that. What was the process of solving that problem? Because it's such an artful result by the time you get to Broadway and touring and eventually a film show. Was it this great destiny from the beginning, or was it sort of hacked together, or like how did you solve that? When you saw the problem, where did you go?
We put them in moving lights. That's what we did.
The tour, yeah.
Go ahead, Ryan.
So
Or Dave.
downtown, I think Catherine Clark will never forget this. When I was like, we're gonna get pie tins, and we're gonna take a measurement from where the light is to this floor, and we're gonna create a custom, you know, shape that will match it. And they had X-Acto knives on the stage, and she'd go up there and put it in. Okay, we had to cut a little more. And so that's downtown was all pie tins, and you know, they had to be, you know, 2 different sizes. They're 2 different rings. They had to blend but be sharp. And so downtown was, you know, it took a couple days for us to get it beautiful. And then when we moved uptown, we kind of kept the same idea, but they were made to real templates. They took the pie tins, we did the measurements again, and then they became. And then Amanda's favorite was if somebody was up, because the New York rig it's a lot of conventionals. It's very heavy, and there's units off the handrails that do the ring because we had ran out of real estate. And so if anybody went up to do a maintenance focus or something, and one of those units got knocked, then it would be a little bit of a process to get them back in order. But you know, they look beautiful. And then for the tours, Chris Annesley helped me tremendously, because it was the touring. You know, what was great about New York is they were straight down, so that you don't have to do the angle degree of. But now they went into moving lights, and we had to do a lot of intricate math, and we did actually 3 trials where we went into a theater, hung the lights, and actually made sure the templates worked, and we did a gradation, and they're all keystone gorgeously. But when we first used those templates, I wasn't on site yet, and they loaded them, and we couldn't get them engraved with which template was which, because they were all different sizes, different angles, but you could barely tell. And the moving light load went in wrong into the unit. And David called me almost having a heart attack. And was like, Ryan, something's off. It's not working. It's not. And thank God we pulled the rig in and made sure the templates were correct. And from then on, it's been you know, it's been seamless. But that first heart attack, and then my heart dropped, because I'm like, oh no, how are we going to solve this?
But don't we now put a number, Ryan? Don't you now put a number actually on the gobo, so that so you can actually know you got the right one in the right place?
Yeah, when the light comes on, you don't see it. Like Chris Robinson and Jimmy Fettigan figured out a way to be able to get us to identify the templates as soon as they come in the box, so they don't get misconfigured again.
Very, very cool. So Amanda, how, you're now dealing with all of these changes, these people bumping into things. You move uptown, you get 3 follow spots. What is your process for keeping all this organized? I mean, this is a big show, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a big show. There's something like 33 songs or something like that in there. So I had an interesting perspective because I wasn't at the downtown version for the whole time with these guys. I was on a different project for Howell. So I had the unique perspective of getting to come in and watch them create for a few nights. And then I joined the team when we moved to Broadway. And they really, I mean, all shows are kind of a huge elephant that you try to eat one bite at a time, but this one really, really was. So they'd be there, going down the list that Ryan makes, like the song list, and you'd see, they had a goal for the night of trying to get to song 15 or whatever, and they would just plug away with, a very interesting, cool, creative idea for each song. And this team has never had a lot of time for this show, which was always interesting to me because it was a very hyped show. So you would think, you hear about other, certain Disney techs or something that take like, I don't know, 2 months. And this show had about 10 days both times. So not only at the public when they originated all these brilliant ideas, but also for the Broadway transfer, it was sort of treated like, oh, can't we just take everything you did downtown and put it up here? Which obviously
Load it all into a truck and move it up a couple blocks. It'll be fine.
yeah, which was a complete relight in the same vein of everything that they did at the public. Like, for instance, I'll never forget watching Rewind for the first time and seeing, I think it was 2500s downtown, doing that template flip and just thinking that idea is brilliant, and it's stayed ever since. All of the ideas were brilliant, but so it's always, and this show is very specific. There is a lot of specificity from not only our team but choreography and director. So I'd say throughout all the different companies, one of the things that you have to keep track the most of is the details, why you pick up that person at that particular line, where they're supposed to be, because it all has, especially with the turntable, it all has compounding effects. And, depending on who's calling it, it was a different, the stage manager was a different caller for Broadway than at the public. So that was another curve also, where a lot of moments were very refined in very little amount of time. So then as the entire room, the team is very tight-knit and very brilliant. And if they were watching a section that they didn't feel was just right, sometimes getting to why that wasn't just right is, it required all eyes and all ears to be like, okay, for instance, any of the bullet sequences or anything like that, any of the gunshots, that's like an entire room project with MIDI and everything else. So, I think if there's anything that I try to hone in on is keeping track of the specific details so that as we're at different companies, you can really know what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and I think I wanna come back to that because I think the duplicating it is a really important part of the process. Once it's baked and done. But the time is really interesting to me, and Howell and David in particular. The show is remarkably precise, right? As Amanda said, like everything about it is tight and it's fast. So there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of changes. Howell, you're pulling focus on a relatively smaller stage with really tight areas. How do you get it all done? As Amanda said, like 10 days of just like, we'll just move it. It's fine. When in reality, you're lighting basically the same ideas for a whole new show. What was that?
Well, I think a lot was spending time in rehearsal, going into, we had a good cue placement through the show. It was just building them, and David is extremely fast. And, a lot of times we could stroke through a number, knowing that we would be able to come back and fill in those gaps. You know, so we were very wise about where we could do that and where we couldn't, you know, and so it was really just a group effort and just staying tight and like I said, you know, every department in the show was so incredibly tight and had a great communication. A weave in the room was very, very tight. So, you know, as far as like, you know, cueing with sound and the synthi and the MIDI and which is tons through the show, and a lot of new stuff I think they had to work on to develop. But you know, just using that kind of creativity that goes beyond what's seen on stage. You know, I mean that was an amazing thing. But we just had to be wise about getting through the show in a proper way, and I think, you know, it really boils down to our director. You know, he had a good eye. He oversaw everything we did every day, and I think that's what really just encouraged us to all. And then when the audience came in, they went ballistic. That's okay, you know. And it just, from all the work we do during the day to what we'd see at night, was like, oh my gosh. So sometimes our list would get a little less, and sometimes our list would like grow.
Right. No, we must be doing something right, you know, like if they're, if they're loving it. Exactly. David, I mean, with a rig of that size and you know, trying to keep track again of just like the moments, every single moment that's there, what sort of things were you using just sort of generally to keep yourself organized? You know, how did you stay in the fold and in the moment with so many different things happening all at once?
Was that to me?
Oh yeah, sorry, David.
Oh, okay. Well, we had a good idea of what we wanted to replicate from downtown. So Ryan and I basically would come in the morning and play catch up. Is what we did, because we had completely different fixtures. So I was going to say to everyone, please don't look too closely at the program, because there's still programming in there that was thrown in there, you know, from Broadway that's still on the book. Because we literally were like, we had new fixtures, completely different fixtures and stuff. We'd be doing flips. We'd be like, okay, it's fine. Let's go. Keep going. It's fine. You know what I mean? Stuff wasn't coming from the right direction, but it was generally right. So we just pounded stuff in every morning, trying to stay ahead of the cast. And I think we managed that, actually. I think they never caught us up.
No.
So, you know, from 10 days go, like into the first preview, we just kept pushing and pushing and pushing, right? I mean, it's just, we knew what it should look like. So we just kind of had to make it follow through with that idea.
Nice, Ryan, if you explained to everyone about just the equipment change that took place from the public up to Broadway. I think that's significant for the viewers to know what David and you had to deal with in that transition, you know, from one theater to the next, because it was very significant.
Absolutely, and the one thing that would, you know, tie up together, we have our song list that Amanda was speaking about that we kept, and we would have a red arrow and a green arrow through Tech in New York. And so the red arrows were David and I and Amanda, we worked through in the morning and get the show, you know, we would hit a cue and the lights would go, and we rebuild. And then we would have the green arrow where we were with TK and Tech. And it was really funny that Tommy would come and tell Hal, I'm going to catch you. And we were like, you don't want to. And it was a blessing. They really caught, we finished the show, and then the company finished the show literally a day later. Like it was so tight. But
and to chime out, there was one dress rehearsal before first preview, one nonstop.
Yeah. And the old Mac Vipers deal. The Mac Vipers make that great sound when they're traveling quite a long distance, and the cast would literally know when stuff would flip, because then you'd hear the on stage go, woo, and you'd hear the lights go, woo.
So they were mimicking the moving lights.
They were mimicking the moving lights, because I was like, yeah, okay, I know that. Yeah, we'll get to that.
Right, I get it.
The cast literally mimicked the sound of the Vipers. Yeah, flipping around. It was pretty hysterical.
Oh,
yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I have a quick one. Oh, go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. So, the gear list. So downtown we had VL 2500s overhead, and then we had the the GLP X4s downtown, and we had like color blast. And when we went to, we sat down, like, okay, what systems do we need? What are we missing? And we had a great conversation, and then we ended up going with the GLP X4 XLs. And David was like, let's, we need the firepower. Let's go for it. And we were like, we never used the light, but it was just like, I said that was one of the major improvements when we moved uptown. That X4 XL light is absolutely stunning. And it's like a beam projector. I mean, it's just stunning. And everybody was like, I want that light. And so that was, that. And then going from the VL 2500s to the Vipers, I think everything translated well. We did our template loads and tried to rework it. And then the only place that we really got stuck was rewind, and Amanda was talking about, with the template rotation, because the control, that wheel, David didn't have like we had before, and that was, we were ended up trying to go to the manufacturer and can we get control, the time speed of the, and we didn't have any luck. And then we added the VL 3500 beam wash upstage, the 6 of those. They were just gorgeous, and that was a nice, add. And then we fleshed out the conventional systems. We added the seat changers, which then it was a popular item. And, the LEDs, we kind of fleshed out. We had a second level, and in New York, we're hoping to get back there because New York, the shop didn't have enough LED gear. So we have a hodgepodge of, I think, 3 different LED units that poor David had to color match so that you wouldn't notice. One had like an amber, the other one had a white. And but, it's great. And what's wild now is seeing the Broadway version, because we were able to adapt through the tours to get all the gear cleaned up and balanced better. And in the set, that it's amazing to see going back to Broadway and seeing, because the conventionals are doing the rings, where on the advanced productions it's all moving lights. But it was a big rig shift, and we couldn't flip the units to match the XYZ, because then it would have started another problem. So poor David, his fingers had to hurt after New York, because he just 8 a.m. the rig is on, checked out, we're moving. But I think that rig, it was beautiful, and the wash lights were originally intended. Andy Blankenbuehler loves his specials, and Howell's like, we have to have, we need to have firepower to be able to cover. And that's one of the first times that we went so far across with them. And it was great, because then it gave, when we had intimate scenes, the architecture and the air, we had all the units that, we could sculpt and create these different environments, which helps morph this single set. So I think, Howell, that kind of takes us down the gear road. And then when we went on tour, we kind of advanced together.
Yeah, and I guess that's an interesting thing for those who haven't advanced a show. So you've spent your massive amounts of time, your 10 days, getting it into a Broadway house. It's packaged, it's up, it's running, it's in the hands of the electricians that are operating the show. The company comes to you and says, all right, we're ready to do the next stop. What sort of process do you go through to get ready for something like that? How do you decide what to keep, what to change? From a design standpoint, we always say like a show is never finished, it's just open. So but when you hit a tour, what is the restraint that you have to hold versus, evolving and changing?
Well, one thing too, there's A tours, there's B tours, there's C tours. So Hamilton was going to be more or less in the A tour category. So it had a extra load-in time, as opposed to shows that go in on a Monday and then perform on Tuesday, or go in Tuesday, perform Tuesday night. So it had advance, but yet too, we had to work on really, cutting this puppy down so it could really just fit on the trucks tightly. Truck space is always a big money thing, and go up quickly. So, we just kind of went through all the systems and changed a lot of stuff to moving lights, and got rid of a boatload of conventionals that just take time to, to hang and focus and that sort of thing. But generally, I mean, scenically, a lot of stuff changed, but it just went to kind of flat goods instead of hard. But you can't even tell the difference. You know, sound had to redo their stuff, but yeah, I think the tours look fantastic. You know, they really just look amazing. And but it's good to see the Broadway show, and you see how the show has had to scale down to accommodate physical plants in other countries and other theaters, but yet get in a truck, tour, come off a truck, go up, and it looks great, and that's a tribute to the team, really is. But I hate when the bus and truck happens, so we have to go back to two fours on a stick.
It'll be full circle, right? The whole thing will come back downtown.
And those donut templates are in source forward.
Exactly. As long as there's a pie budget, I think everybody will be happy. So. Ryan and Amanda, what is that sort of take, right? What are you doing in relation to other departments as these things change? How are you ensuring that this thing is as Howell said, truck ready? Talk us a little bit through that process.
I think for us preparing for the tour, I think the big thing was that helped dictate a lot is how much truck space do we have. That was the big thing, and we looked at each other and we're like, we can't cut much, like moving light wise, because this show is so dependent, and we looked at it and it was just there. We had to add to it. We had to go out with 8 electrics, and we made towers. We were really creative. Jimmy and Chris, there was a lot of volleying back and forth between everybody, and even the sound department, scenic department. Can we cut a hole here so the light can travel up that wall better? Then we don't need this. It was a lot of back and forth and a lot of learning. I think we did a lot of learning when Chicago went up, and we were able to kind of morph and find new solutions. And then like London came, and then that became a bigger version, of things that we learned. Every time we mount the show, the front of house gives us different scenarios that we can and can't do, and we keep learning and finding, oh, that looks great there, let's do this. And so I think on that end, we were able to find a happy balance. The good thing about overhead from 0 up is always consistent, and that's where the firepower of the show is. And then David did a brilliant job. We'll get later, like, how do we recreate this every night? Because it's not 10 focuses either, And I think Amanda then had to do a lot of re-engineering on her end.
Well, and I'll just chime in too that something that was kind of unique about this was that there was 2 sit downs in Chicago and San Francisco before it had to traditionally tour. So for all departments, and especially us, that was a good learning time to really condense things and clean it up, because like we love Broadway, we love how it looks, but there's a lot there's a lot of detail thrown in there that wasn't going to be able to tour. But the team has a responsibility to all of the creatives that they really remember what they're looking at. So Ryan and David and Hal really thought very carefully about the changes that they were going to need to making sure that they could still provide the look of the show. And the other thing that you mentioned earlier, Nick, about like with interacting with departments, there's now existing for the tours a basically like joint choreography, stage management, moving light, focus point document. We didn't have that going out in New York. That developed over Chicago and San Francisco, because we need the person who's going to be able to focus the specials to put them on 8, 6, and 8 or whatever, and there won't be any time on the tour to discuss whether that's correct or not. So that document, Ryan helped develop that we now have. And in the same way, like Dave came up with great new ideas for how to focus the show that include the overhead cameras. To my knowledge, I don't believe Dave ever focused a show that way before. So it's like Ryan said, it's been a giant learning process to be able to keep the amazing look in the time frame that we now.
Yeah, David, do you have anything to sort of talk about with that? How are you, when you're doing something like bringing it into Broadway, you're just putting in stuff like presets and palettes to get that moment done, but now you take that, it's built, and you've got to turn it around to another location. How do you go about culling that? How do you decide what a touring team has the time to do, and how do you bring that stuff down?
We were lucky that we were given, I think we were given a week. Again, the whole week. I believe it was a week that basically I went into ETC and basically reverse engineered. Went through with previs and went through and sat through every cue, and then went, how am I going to cull down? I want to say it was over 600 preset focuses. Well, it was well over 600. I think because eventually I got it down to 600, so it was probably more than that. And then I got it down, and eventually like whittled it down and whittled it down by stepping through cue to cue to cue, going, this is in the scene that does this. How can I replicate that without losing anything? Okay, so on the Hamilton, on the programming project, there is that 4 main points going from downstage to upstage. And basically, I do a lot of stuff working off of those 4 points. So that was the main thing that we tried to get it down to. I think we got it down to, I want to say 400, which for a touring rig is still
substantial.
Still made everybody go, what? You're going to tour how many? And he's got to focus it in 8 hours. 8 hours and 400 presets is a lot.
Yeah.
I tell everybody the first time I think we did it outside of Broadway was they gave me 3 8-hour days to focus the rig. It took me effectively 24 hours to focus. So we knew. So
pointing out that a lot of these focuses are like carefully lined up shutter cuts and template orientation and stuff. It's not like oh, just put a light over there.
Yeah,
right. They're persnickety. They're not just like.
No. And if you watch the show, there's a lot of stuff where everything flows from one into another. So we start in one corner, everything grows out of that, morphs into something else, changes color, gobos roll. I mean, so if you screw something up over here, you're done for like the next 20, 30 cues. I mean, you've got to then reverse, and then you've got to go back and go, oh, why did that flip? Oh, it's because I made that. So there was a very much a process of, when the guy's on the road, I was like, you can't muck around with this. You have to be very precise about it. So we're lucky that we have some great electricians out there, that take care of this rig. And they're all very much like, holy shit, how are we going to do this? And they've got it down. I mean, they really do. Now those guys get it down. I don't know. It doesn't take them 8 hours anymore. A lot of them, I think, are doing it in less. So.
Well, don't tell too many people that, right? Like,
yeah,
too, I just want to say San Francisco was the first time we tried with traditional spot calling, because in Chicago we were all there for a while, so there was a spot caller, but that whole team, those original 3 fall spots, took that whole show from its opening to close in Chicago. So San Francisco was the first time we had our Wonder Woman Anne with us, who I worked closely with to develop a lot of the calling of the show. And, we were really wondering, is this going to work? Because, especially in the beginning, you get out there with a lot of people in the same costume and these pickups are really fast, so, and it's not going to look good if they're late or not there. So, it was pretty amazing to see. She was in San Francisco and just really honed in on her calling, and then called for the first time in LA. And I never called in LA. And that was pretty amazing to see that it was indeed going to work.
One thing I'm off of, so we had done that previs to kind of break down the show, but then we actually flew to LA, where the San Francisco company transferred to LA, and we put the disc in. They were doing a run through where Patrick was going to be there, and they were doing a cast run through, and we're like, let's see what happens and see even who notices this change, because what was absolutely brilliant, you can't tell, if you really look, you can find a few places that were cheated, but it looks like the show. And like I was like, David, you're an absolute genius. Like, the man is so brilliant. And we sat there and ran that run through, and Patrick came up to the intermission. He goes, I don't notice anything different. And he's been seeing the show. He's been with the show since downtown. And he would come up to give me notes. That looks different. I was like, yeah, we kind of this and this. And he has such a beautiful eye, and he could find every little thing that we changed, and he did not notice anything in LA when we ran with that disc. And that was going to be the touring disc. And I think the one thing that's important that we really, you know, when Hamilton goes on the road, the important thing is the show has to hang on its points. And that is what also helps the crew. Like, there was always talk of a Hamel grid or any of that, master grid, and we kind of voted around that. It was only if the show can hang on its points that we can move a show this size with this amount of focuses. And I think that, you know, that the brilliance of that production team, that Jimmy and his team, you know, they just do an amazing job. And they do, whenever we go to visit, it's the show. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, right? Is that, like, you know, for those big logical decisions about, like, okay, everything upstage of zero is exactly the same. It's in the same position. You know, a simple, seemingly simple choice like that makes something so massive now more attainable. You know, chewing on the elephant, as Amanda said.
Well, it's also something that was afforded to us because we're Hamilton. You can't with every tour insist that there won't be a band shell or that you get your points. You know, I like Hal pointed out in the beginning, and Brian, you have to work with the confines of what you're given. But luckily, Hamilton has been so successful that they took it to the producers and said, you know, this is, if we want the show to look like this, this is something we have to have. And they put it in the writer, and it's been.
Very good.
It's pretty amazing is that they do a Tuesday night show. That was an absolute, like, from above. They load in. They have to have a Tuesday night show for the subscriptions because they're selling full seasons of subscriptions. And we all went to Hal. We're like, this is impossible. We were like this, and you know, instead, you know, and they were like, it has to be a Tuesday night show. And you know what? In the end, they have their Tuesday night shows, and it's been amazing ever since. But like Amanda said, when they first did that, we were actually teching in Seattle when they moved LA. So we had like split teams because we were both in production twice in two places, and we were getting like hourly phone calls. How's everything? Are we good? Is it going to make it on time? I mean, it was like a nail biting. We were in tech, but so nervous about the other move that we couldn't focus. And then I think like David and Amanda shot to the move, and then Hal and I were at the other spot, and we had another programmer come in, and then they left. It was crazy.
I guess how do you know, and Howell in particular sort of head of the department, and you know, how do you start managing that? You know, one show is gigantic enough to get in and up going, and you know, when you've got a show in New York that's maintaining, and presumably they have questions and issues there, and you've installed companies in various cities, and now you've got people on the road, venue to venue. What does the administration of all of that look like? How does the team manage that? How does the studio keep all that running?
Well, I think Ryan's been very successful putting together a great team. You know, we have several people that know the show well, and in all departments. So it is orchestrating and planning and working out dates and that sort of thing. But no, he's done a great job there as far as just the administration part of the show.
Very good. Putting the right people in the right place.
Yeah.
We've gotten several questions about, you know, it's no surprise to anyone, I think, that the filming of the New York show was released on Disney Plus this past weekend. You know, Howell, you've lit, you know, one or two shows on Broadway nowadays. You know, what is the process for getting a show ready for filming? I know that they archive a lot of Broadway shows. How was Hamilton different from sort of that general archival process? And kind of, you know, what do you expect to maintain and what do you expect to lose as part of the design when you're going to that new media?
Well, you know, it was a new media for me, especially with this type of film shoot, where they had so many cameras rolling all the time. But one great thing about going into hand film is that they wanted to preserve the look of the theatrical production. I mean, that was the big thing. They didn't want to, put a scene on a street or, something like that. I mean, they wanted to shoot the theater show. So we pretty much had to modify every cue, but just, it was either leveling up, leveling down, adding some socket light for eyes. I mean, but it was going through the whole show and just making sure that the cameras had a good shot, But the film crew that came in, they were really awesome, and they had their act together. And they had, when we were on another very, very tight schedule through that whole process. So, but the guys were really good and they knew what they wanted. So right there, you're halfway around the track. It was really helpful. We weren't searching for a lot of things, and anytime there was a discussion, there was a break, it was done quickly, a solution was made, and we were back on,
Well, it's amazing. I mean, I think that's great that they were so keen to preserve the theatrical experience.
And their color correction they did in post was beautiful and sounded great. I mean, just a miraculous job on those. They did a great job.
Well, I think what a great homage to what you all do all the time is to really preserve that in-room experience, and it's definitively a different art than TV or film. So
yeah, true, very true.
One of the things that I noticed in rewatching that, I had the pleasure to see it in New York, but I obviously watched it this weekend as well. The floor and the movement is a big voice for me, at least, in the show. I've been to several techs with y'all, and so talk about sort of the setup of where everybody is in the room, and the leading question I'm asking is like, who's kind of dealing with the floor and with things that maybe are harder to see on an orchestra level, and what's that relationship like for artistic versus functionality?
Well, I'll start that one because I think for me it stemmed from the Newman. I mean, because it's a raked audience. I mean, the audience. So everybody initially, everybody from Howell to Ryan to the director they all were sitting at a point where they were looking down at the stage. So it was, for everybody, it was about the floor. I mean, it started being a show about floor. Right. You know what I mean? Because that's what everybody was looking at. That was our biggest piece of scenery. So that's, that it stemmed from there. And then the Rogers is the same to a degree. It's quite I would say, 80% or more of that audience sees the floor.
Yeah.
So when we hit Chicago and it wasn't raked, I think I was the only one that was freaking out. I was like, everyone's going to hate it. Everyone's not going to, they're not going to. It didn't happen that way at all. You know what I mean? It just meant I spent more time going, oh, I want to see more air. You know what I mean? It was quite an interesting turnaround for me after staring at the floor for so long. All of a sudden I'm going, oh, why aren't we seeing more beams? You know what I mean? So it really evolved the show again, it became a beamier in a way after Chicago. So that's my 2 cents.
We call David the floor police. And he'll say, "Oh, the floor looks horrible. What are you guys doing?" But that's a good point from him, And especially with Hamilton, we knew the floor had to really serve as a carpet, just to be able to break it up, from a full stage down to a bench, to a table, to some, a couple of chairs. So it had to be very flexible, and just having 2 turntables and that was it. We were kind of limited, so we had to have a lot of flexibility on that floor, and that's kind of what we all treated the floor like, as a big carpet.
And it looks exquisite, and the motion. Like, I remember in Chicago, I went to the Fall Spot booth, and I sat. The first thought I had is, I want to take a picture of every cue, and we can make a catalog, like a calendar. It's just, from every, if you don't see the floor in the show, like, it adds so much to just the subtlety and the sexiness I mean, it really just adds, and it's the beautiful blend of the conventional and the moving light and the wash lights and the LED uplight. I mean, it is just, it's a masterclass in cueing, in texture, in everything. It's, stunning.
And I'll add that we aren't the only ones on the think this. the like director and choreography frequently get upstairs. They love seeing it from up there.
That's amazing.
Early on in the process as well. Like before we have an audience, they're upstairs. But also, sorry, Nick, just one thing is amazing about when we mount these shows now is that the choreography comes to us now. So they know that what we do is we don't do guest lighting, we do factual lighting. We recreate this show based off of factual numbers. And so all the guessing game we used to do back in the day is gone. Like we have numbers and we foot marks, and David, is just brilliantly engineers it in that there's no guessing. So Andy would say, quick, go into that special, that's where you need to be. And they would come to us if there was ever a thing. What we would have at the tech table is 2 screens, one with the MLA photo showing exactly where we are, and then we would have a video on the screen below so we can scrub back and forth to show everybody exactly what it was, so that it's seamless. Because also we didn't have a lot of time, but then it's fact lighting. In our cue sheet, it has 0 left, 2 up for that specials. So it's written in multiple places and it all lines up. So we're all on the same page every time, every production around the world.
That's amazing. And David, I know that you put some time into getting that stuff together for the programming project, and that's the stuff that the tours are using to bring it back, right?
Right. Well, that's why towards the end of the project we added in Theodosia, which was we were putting in the footmarks, and I was like, oh, Nick, initially we had this focusing dummy called Theodosia, so in the programming project we put in an object that was we called Theodosia, so you could put her at 4 right plus 2, and Theodosia would move there, and so that was hopefully a little bit of fun that anybody that does the project is actually happened. We had. So
the real Theodosia started in San Francisco, I think. Maybe it was Chicago.
No, it was San Fran. She showed up in San Fran.
We were always putting mic stands with paper or with a wig head around for David for his to help focus the show before the cast was there. And someone I can't remember who officially ordered it.
We never found out for the longest time.
We did, but I forgot.
The clutch stage manager.
JP.
Was it? I don't even know.
I ordered a full mannequin with a dark-haired wig, and costumes gave her like a spare revolutionary coat. Yeah. So we had an actual real life mannequin to move around for him that we named Theodosia.
Amazing. She was the unseen character that traveled with you.
Yeah.
The cast got really attached to her. She would hang out backstage.
Everyone take pictures with her. Yeah, it was pretty funny. But it comes down to your point of you could put a Theodosia at that point, and we've been very, very accurate about where stuff has to go.
Well, and I think it's an interesting conversation because the fact that you were sort of the ruler in the room, as it were. If choreography is coming to you, if other departments are coming to you because of your precision, I think that's a really just an interesting thing. It kind of ties into a question that we had come in, which is discussing sort of stage management and calling. And how much of the show is set up to either show control, or are there things that are synchronized that are auto goes, or what is sort of the diversity of that throughout the show, and how do you decide what is called by a person versus what is synchronized?
I think Ryan, you can handle that.
Yeah, let's let Ryan do that one.
It's every time we mount the show with a new stage manager, it's a point of contention. But I'd say a quarter of the show is MIDI, triggers, but also that some come from the sound console and some come from the pit. And we have a nice track sheet of what comes where. The Hamilton hits, there's a lot of like things where it was just so tight that we want to get rid of human error. There was sound effects we wanted to line up. And then there's also times where there is automation and there's a call cue and automation picks back up again. So it's very, very tricky. That's what's great is JB, the production stage manager who did the original company, is always when we're remounting a show. And they, the stage managers, we have calling videos, so they're always prepped before coming in. And we ended up in tech just kind of getting the minutia of clarifying for them what they should be feeling for that call. So, when they feel awkward about calling it, we kind of help to clarify that. And that seems to help. The show is so tight that when you are a little off, it's noticed. And Kim, one of our production stage managers that has been with us in Chicago, has been really great. And every stage manager has a little twist where there's always a cue that is like tricky for them that they kind of made their own. And it's, one of them is in the second act where, the jukebox or whatever everybody had, like Cameron in Chicago just couldn't call it where we wanted it. So we let him land it where he had it, and then ended up, it's just like, it looks great. It still gets the idea across, and we're all happy. Yeah. But I think,
oh, go ahead, Bryce.
No, the automation in the show, when we went to London, people get a little worked up when the MIDI goes down, and we're very clear about the training of the people in the pit that they know exactly that they trigger the blackout at the end of Act 1. That drummer hits a thing and poof, and we all go to black. And every stage manager gets very sensitive about the MIDI. And we just clarify, it's like, the human error factor is much larger than the technical that we can get the accuracy that we're looking for. And so once I had the conversation, and Hal brought it up because it's every time we have a new stage manager, it's a conversation like 3 or 4 previews in that we have to kind of have the clarity of why exactly the show is built and controlled this way.
Especially through all the battle sequences in the show. I mean, the only way to get them called consistent was to show code them. And, David and Ryan in the sound department did an exquisite job just layering that in and how it was going to be done and finding out what would work best to execute those cues. So there's quite a substantial amount of MIDI throughout the course of the show, which we're very thankful for. We're back in the day, I know you hate hearing this, but we didn't have that, so it's another great tool of technology that's developed.
And I was going to chime in about that the sound team, Nevin and Jason and the Ableton programmers and Scott Wasserman, the music and sound team is so precise on this that we are very fortunate to have great communication about where something is supposed to go. That's not always the case, or you might be taking a risk if you're allowing it to fall musically, especially if time code is like changing frequently. But we've never had that issue on this particular show because they keep so well track of everything. So they take really good care of us.
Yeah, they do.
It's amazing. But I think that's something sort of shows in general, right? Our creative partners and audiences are, that expectation of really tight timing and things linking up together is becoming a lot more prevalent in our world and in live performance. And so I certainly think it's something that people are requesting more. Exactly.
Going back to staff again, though, it's as long as you have the right team in place to make those things happen consistently, then you're good. But there are some shows that do request that don't have those people in place. And you have to explain why that's pretty risky, what you're asking.
Very good. David, do you have any other thoughts on working with the team, the other departments on bringing that stuff in?
No, early on, as they said, working with the Ableton programmer, Ryan and I would be, it was like, he was like, well, where do you want it? We'd be like, we want it here. And he'd be like, here. No, we'd be like, back it up a second, back it up a quarter second. Because it took a little bit of a plane to get it to land where the Ableton guy knew what it should be, and where Ryan and I knew that it should come by the time the lights interacted with the program. So yeah, it was fun. It was a good process, you know, until the first time it didn't work. We were like, "Where's the backup?" And they're like, "What backup?"
I'm sure that's something that gets resolved very quickly, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of bringing it back to artistic side, Howell. In the queuing and in the show in general, you rely a lot on side light. You rely a lot on foot lighting. What was sort of your process to come to angles? You know, it's a very dramatically lit show. What was sort of your process to arrive at carving out those looks and placing fixtures in space?
Well, it's a great question. I think, we were very fortunate to have these side openings, stage right and left, where we could squeeze in these mini booms. And they had pars and licos, and they had a great shin buster. And so a lot of the ensemble dance numbers, we would pretty much kind of rim dim and start with the shins from one side, just to model the stage coming from one side, because what was great about that is how it would light up the upper part of the other side of the set, So that was, I think, a huge asset to have those little openings. And believe me, they're not big. And with girls with big hoop skirts trying to get through, I mean, it's a real traffic jam, But, it's like each piece we had to really kind of rip apart in a way to dissect it in a certain way. But I decided, like, primarily with all the choreography that was happening in the storytelling process, had to be sculpted. It had to be, just kissed with light a little, just, didn't have to take away from the principal singer or whatever. But we found that to be quite effective throughout the whole show,
Very cool. And I guess kind of following on that, we talked about the speed at which you all were working and sort of the limitations in both downtown and uptown. I guess from a process standpoint, from designing, where do you, as you do pass after pass after pass, how do you decide sort of how deep each of those layers needs to be, and how do you retain the trust of your other collaborators that you're going to get there? Obviously, you have that vision, but there's a time constraint. What's your process for deciding the depth of those layers and assuring people that it will all be okay?
Well, is that a question for me?
Yeah, I think so.
I'll tell you, you look at all the versions of the show, and the show is just where it needs to be. And Ryan spends a lot of time with it. I don't think he wants to change a thing. I mean, it is what it is. And if you do change one little thing, it'll domino effect into others. It'll mess stuff up, So, I mean, really, and the crew does such a great job in maintaining the show. But what hasn't been brought up about your question is how so well documented the show is. These guys have done an impeccable job of documentation, of focus, of cueing, of MIDI, of what's automated, what's in and out. I mean, when the turntable's moving, when it's not. These are essential parts of the layering of Hamilton. And without those being documented, you'd just be lost, especially when, a choreographer has to come to us, to kind of, should that be at 5 or 6? Well, the Chicago company's always been at 5, so it's that kind of thing. But that's been a true value in their work, to have the show so well documented, and like, yes, it took 8 hours to do all the preset focuses, but these guys are good. They know what to look for. They know what their priorities are through the course of getting the show ready for a performance that night.
Thank you. springing off of that, I guess Amanda and David, where do you kind of feel, and Ryan chime in too, obviously, but with such a complicated show, there's the thing that's popping to my mind is too much is almost enough when it comes to documentation. How did you start taking bites of that elephant? Where did you see, especially as the show's developing, what gets documented first? Why does it? Amanda, you said that some stuff grew out of other, going to different cities and things like that. How do you even take something that is this gigantic and start to distill it down to something that you can replicate?
I think Brian, you should talk about again, it comes down to like the first time that it was ever a discussion of, oh, that looks different. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And we knew we were very good about how we replicated it. So we were like, how do we then pass that knowledge on to, say, the director or choreographer team? And actually, it is exactly how it was. And Ryan came up with the concept of the MLA photos on one monitor, the video on another, so that he could go, well, here it is. Here's exactly, look up there, look here. Which one, here's the MLA photo, here's the video. So that then it cut that discussion down to, oh.
Right. Yeah.
And then we were like, always like, fine, do you want to move it? I mean, we're happy to move it, but then you've got Angelica, as Ryan was saying, at 4 right, and Eliza at 5 right, which, well, that's 5. Now you've got 2 sets of documentation.
Well, and
Chicago somewhere else. So now you've got 3 sets of documentation. So that was a discussion that Ryan was at the forefront of, and so he should probably talk to that a bit more.
Well, I think one thing is David has definitely guided us into the genius of documentation. But the keeping the artistic happy, it became a discussion with Howell and us of, do we want every company to be their own version, or do we want to keep it so then when the artistic, and when Andy and Tommy are bouncing around 2 companies, to be the same? And then they, at first it was like, New York is New York, it'll always stay New York, it'll be that. And then the new companies now, so the touring, LA, they all have the same coordinates because then they're the same production, because people were getting confused and people were changing stuff, and then the road crew would come back to us and say, hey, this is changing, and then we would have to kind of get involved and smooth things out. But right now, New York is New York, and then London is London. But the other 3 US companies are all carbon copies. Maybe a few small things, but they are, and that was a choice that we had to make after the conversations with Howell and Tommy and everybody, to keep everybody on the same page, because people are getting confused, and the crews, they're going after the stage manager and the crew, and they're putting it awkward. We have to just kind of all unite, and now it makes it easier, so we can say, that shot 6 left, 5 plus, and that's where that person's going to land, and they've been great. And with the documentation, as Amanda said, we're constantly evolving and learning, and she's done, come up with these ideas, and then we talk about it, and other people have come in and brought new ideas, and the genius thing is David's work, though, with the numbers, with the cones. He's like, we should put ropes in those turntables, and I said, if David does something even beyond this that I don't think you guys see in the MLA photos. If a photo comes up and has 3 beams in the air, the fixture number is written on those beams. So if Stevie D's on tour and he goes to Q60 and he looks at that screen because something's wrong, he sees those 3 beams and those fixture numbers, because the MLA tracks with the show during the show, so he can look to the MLA, look at the stage to see if there's anything wrong, and he knows fixture 56 is off, I got to reset it. And that's something that David's brought to the table that has just been brilliant, and everybody is like, wow, now we really can be efficient on the road. We can be efficient in tech, because then I can say, David, fixture 5 needs to, and he's, how'd you know that number? I was like, look at your picture, and then he would giggle, because he created, just this gorgeous way of documenting, which is so important to recreate these shows and to keep it consistent. That it's factual lighting is what I'll go to, with no more guessing. And
well, I just kind of. Oh, sorry to chime in, like what you were saying earlier, Nick, about, assuring the creatives that it's going to be okay. This whole team is familiar with this creative team from In the Heights, like Howell mentioned. And Ryan did several tours of that as well. So we had a very good familiarity with the expectations of this team, and they're very high. It's a very high profile room. And it's, I wouldn't say necessarily high pressure, but that's why David works so tirelessly every morning that he works on the show, because they have to have it ready for the creatives. The only time there was, any kind of forgiveness, I would say, was the public. There's never been any after that. So they know they have to get it perfect before Tommy and Andy see it. Otherwise, it's going to be a discussion. So that has kind of how everything has evolved. All of what we do now is based basically on that whole premise.
And even that process, Amanda, like even when Puerto Rico, we had to switch venues. We still did our process where we focused the conventional rig. David does the moving light rig, and sometimes he merges. But then we have a whole checks and balances where once David's through the moving light focus, then we step through every cue, and sometimes twice, to make sure everything's in line, everything looks right, the LEDs are balanced, like full show conditions, the house lights are off, so that we have done our due diligence, and that's all built into the schedule. I mean, it's very, like, there is no breathing room, but it's we have our chunk of time that we use during sound check, and it's so then, like Amanda said, that the show is in and ready to go by the time the creatives hit the room.
It's amazing. And and Howell actually kind of started with this as a discussion point, obviously working with the same team over and over starts to develop that shorthand. But were there other instances that you can recall that helped like expedite some of that shorthand, either on this process or a previous show, to make working with those other team members easier? Or there, I've heard of like, oh, I leave a bowl of candy at my tech table, or ways to sort of like lure people in. How do you get to comfortable fast, I guess is the question.
Well, that's a great question. Every day is a new day, and you think you could know somebody's, how they're going to be during that day. But I think in this situation, that wasn't necessarily the case all the time. But, I think like working with Andy Blankenbuehler, who is a genius, you work, he has a style, and it's a very unique style. And he does so much in his movement. And just being able to learn that about him and what he does and how his ensembles execute, I think as a designer, you pick up a lot there. So you learn how to start modeling it in a unique way that kind of tells his story. And sometimes, believe me, I was off the charts wrong. What are you doing? What are you doing? Too rise, too low, okay. So I mean, that sort of thing. But, so you got to make your choices as a designer. You got to go into the room ready, and as I said 3 times before, having a great team beside me has always been a blessing. And having that unspoken vocabulary in the room is great. But you don't always know, it's like there's a cue in Hamilton where King George says, "I am blue." And Tommy wanted the whole stage to go blue. And it's like, I didn't want the whole stage to go blue. But you know what? If the director wants the stage to go blue, it's going to go blue. It's that kind of thing. And that's a big hit cue. So it's those kind of things that work well in the room, that then only happen in the room where it happened in the room, Yeah. So, anyway.
Amanda, Ryan, and David, I guess as well. Are y'all? Are you making like interdepartmental alliances? Amanda, you mentioned sort of this piece of paperwork that came out of sort of necessity, but like, what is it like to? Obviously, Howell is working with the other creative heads and things, and then there's a get it done. Do we send MIDI here? How does this talk to that? What's being called when? How are you dealing with those relationships and forging those alliances so that like everything continues to lurch forward?
Well, I think one great thing about is the way we set up our comm stations, and that we have like Howell listens to his channel to David, and no one else talks on that channel. And so We have the fall spots and everything else. And so our fourth channel, since we didn't have video, would be to the music team. And, and what's great about the relationship is they're like our friends. They're like, like we're not people we just say hello to, let's go to work and that. And so, like when they have a baby, we're congratulations. I mean, these are all wonderful people, and they're very, they want to help. And so it made it so much easier. So then we had a crazy idea, like we really want to see if we can land this MIDI cue here. Can you help us? And like David said earlier, like, no, let's move it back a little bit. They had the patience for us to do that. But all that can be happening on channel 4, while David and Howell are still working on channel 2, and then Amanda's with the fall spots on 3. So the way that we, that's the way we can be as efficient as possible. And then our first channel is stage manager. So if Howell ever need to talk to the stage manager, or, everything's clear communication, but 3 people can be working at the same time and not holding up any of the process. And I think that's what's brilliant, how Howell sets up his team and how we all function, so that there is no holdup, there's no slowdown. Like Amanda's flying on her channel, I'm flying on mine, and then we have the radio to the electricians that come to us, we have this problem. And everything is moving, and what's great about the team is we all love each other. We're all amazing people, and everybody trusts each other. So if there's a thought, hey, what about this? It's not like there's not a blow up. It's like, yeah, okay, let's make this happen. And I think it's really important. It's always been important to Howell is have a team that is on the same page, where we're all there, and there's no attitude, there's no me. It's us. We're a team. How are we going to make this happen together?
Good. A couple of questions that have been coming in are sort of taking us back to a little bit of the gear side. So I'm interested in kind of a couple general things, which is sort of selection of equipment, lighting, fixtures, things like that. What is the process? What are the obstacles at various stages of a show? And also a question came in about maintenance. Hamilton is still on Broadway, and presumably will be for quite some time. As technology changes, as things evolve, what is the process for keeping something like this alive? Do you want to talk about evaluating fixtures maybe at first? Like how do you decide?
Well, it's a joint process, and then because we go through several versions of what we want. Well, we start out with what we really want. We start out with our film version. Okay, this is the equipment we want on the show. And then we send it in, and we get the number back, which is, oh, what are you doing? We can't afford this show, blah, 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 blah. So then we have to go to kind of plan B and start knocking it down and making some subs and this and that. So let me tell you, it's 5, 6, 7, sometimes more versions of the show before we can land on. But it's really a process with us all. Like do we want Vipers here? Do we want 2500s? What type of wash do we want? Because it's going to need to do X amount of things. So that's kind of, I just don't decide and say, here's what we want. We look at, and then it's a lot of fixtures I haven't even used. So we'll get a little shootout set up for me so we can all go and kind of see what that light's, got in its tool bag. So, which is really kind of fun. So that's a big process there. Just getting it down to that weekly budget. Nobody ever sees, but it does. It takes us weeks to noodle down to get to where we want, and then then when the tour comes, we usually get what we want or something. Believe me, it's a time-consuming process, but we learn a lot from it, and sometimes the substitutions that come into play are actually very good, and there are units that we keep using, that we probably wouldn't have chosen unless we, were forced into like looking at some different type of fixtures. So that's one thing, with the technology changing as rapidly as it is, it's good even for all the young designers, you got to stay on top of what's being developed. All the tools that, ETC is coming out with, all the the new moving lights and the LED. You know, I was telling Ryan and Amanda 20 years ago I wanted to grow up and be an LED. You know, I mean, look at it. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. But technology is huge. It's huge. And just in the drafting, you know, Vectorworks, that sort of thing. You know, Ryan and Amanda, they're whizzes at it. They draft impeccably, but they're on top of it and they do it every day. You know, and but for the students, that's another part of technology, learning that and making it their own signature little thing, you know. So, but as a pain, as much as a pain it can be is putting together a shop order, there is some positive things that do come out of it in the end. But one other thing I just want to interject. The same team here, we did a show years ago called $1 Million Quartet. Okay, and we went into the Nederlander Theater. And we were fortunate enough to have David Arch as our programmer. So in the kind of our pre-talking about the show and this and that, and I know David at that point was just a grandma guy. Total grandma, that's all he used. We came down to that weekly number of expenses. We only got this much money. And we approached Dave, said, would you consider using the EOS? And he said, absolutely, I would love to. You know, so here's a programmer going above and beyond his comfort level into a whole nother vocabulary, you know, something that he hadn't really done a big show on. And since then, I mean, I think the only person that took him back to a grandma was Barbara Streisand. But then again,
Hugh Van Stone, he probably is actually. Yeah.
But then again, it's all about technology, learning it, staying ahead. But you know, I really respected Dave that day when he said, you know, it's going to be tough. I'm not going to be as fast, but I can do that. You know, and that was a key decision. You know, I hoped you really learn a lot more about the console and its shortcuts and this and that. And, you know, but then again, it's a process, it's a team, it's a, you know, but again, to the, you know, all the young designers, man, it's about the technology and what you want to learn out of it. Because, I mean, if it's going to benefit your show, you know, how much you know at this point. Anyway, I just had to say that.
I love that. That's a great story. Ryan, do you have any other thoughts on sort of gear, getting it ready? You know, the shop number, obviously. You know, I think for people that don't sort of know where Broadway works, you know, a lot of these shows are speculative, right? Is it going to do well or is it not? They're putting a lot of money forward to hope that it does. So that weekly number, as Howell said, is quite important to meet. What other kinds of things are you looking for when you're trying to get either for the Broadway or starting to push out on tour? What's your process?
Well, I think if we're using a piece of gear that we haven't used before, we always check the roadworthy of it. Is it going to be able to hold up in the trucks? Is it going to hold up? Because we were doing a demo for our famous ringlets, and we found out that the unit that we were going to use, when we powered the system down and powered it back up again, they didn't go back to where they were going to go. And it was a different moving light. And it was a big learning curve that we almost had a moving light that wasn't going to go back to its XYZ, and that the templates weren't indexed correctly. And so, you know, that was a great learning thing that we did not expect. And so 10 minutes later, we shot over to the Richard Rogers to do the same test to make sure that, you know, the Vipers could do what we needed. And but I think that we also look at, you know, like that, you know, how number is always important, what's on the shelf of the shop, and what, you know, what equipment, especially for the Hamiltons, because we know they're going to last. What is the newer version of that gear that's going to last us, because we know it's going to be out for years, especially on the road. And so we like the stuff on the consoles on the road, we upgraded because we knew that it was going to last, and it might take the shop a little extra money, but then it's the maintenance down the road is the huge thing. That's where the cost comes. So we're very cost conscientious, and to make sure that the show is preserved in the way that we said it when we're there. You know, and we've upgraded. There's the LED source 4s now in the version. We've kind of done upgrades as we've gone, and then so it's. I think right now where it's at is great, and we have definitely a list of things that we're going to improve as we go. But we're definitely very conscious of the new gear coming out. So it's maintainable, because that's huge. If you have failures, especially on this show, it's going to hurt. And the crews have a maintenance schedule and a lamp schedule. They have all these schedules to maintain the show. The units are vacuumed out. There's all this infrastructure that is set up to maintain the gear so that we do have as minimal failures as possible. I mean, anything you want to toss in there?
No, sounds.
Well, we've run about 90 minutes, so I want to ask just a couple of quick things to wrap up. I'll give you the last one first so that you can mull on it, and we'll come back to it. Which is, I know that we have a lot of students that are joining us, young professionals. What are your thoughts for them, or advice, or tidbits that you would pass along to students? And I'll go round robin in a little bit on that, because I think that'll be a nice way to part. But sort of the impetus again for getting us all together was that David was moving Hamilton into augmented, and through that was like, well, hey, if I'm learning this, maybe other people would like to as well, which I think was very generous of all of you, your whole team, to share that with everybody. But David, just really quickly, we've been in a beta series for 3.0. Augmented is something that's coming. We've had Viz for a while. I'm just sort of curious on your take as to what something like that, and this isn't a sales pitch or anything, but honest feelings of do you think that this is going to change the process for how people light shows, and all the way from idea to documentation to touring? I'm kind of curious as to where you think something like this could help a complicated show like Hamilton get on the road, where maybe there's places that we're not quite there yet. I'm just sort of, you spent a lot of time in it, and I'm interested in your take on it.
Yeah, I think anytime you've got software incorporated, like the A3D is, into the EOS platform, is fantastic. I mean, we've always had to go onto external software to get what we need. And as I said, we had to basically take, an external Viz program when we were working on the tour and re-engineer it. I mean, because we didn't have any kind of 3D program when we set up Hamilton. So I had to literally, we had to import everything in and then literally go, oh, here is downstage center. I literally had to go in and move every single light so that it would get to the right position. And so there was having this as a tool going in. I mean, I tend to now do every show in some kind of Viz format before we even get into the theater. So knowing that at some point it's probably going to tour, or you're going to, you know what I mean? So I don't have to re-engineer backward again, because that was something you don't ever have to do. So I think this is going to be a great tool for pre and post. As I said, when we first threw it from Vectorworks, we were all like, holy shit, look at that. There's the paths. The indexing was, I would say, 99% right, which was blown away. I was like, I would never expected that to come in. As I said, the shuttering was, maybe it was a little bit off in its rotation, but it was there. So you guys did an amazing, I mean, I don't know if you knew that, but I mean, I have to say, to take an existing show and throw it in and go, oh, it was recognizable straight out of the bat. So that was fantastic. So that kind of inspired me to go, oh, this is going to be good. You know what I mean? That didn't keep going. Oh, that's why then I was like, well, let's throw the Hamilton. You know what I mean? I was like, let's keep going. I don't know, I think it's going to be a great tool. And as I said, initially, as we were doing this, I was like, oh, I needed to do, remember, David, it's not a previs program. It's a programming tool. You know what I mean? So that when you guys look at the pictures, there was quite a bit of, I was like, well, how do I know what it should look like. How do we get that to look like that? So that, you know what I mean? And there is ways and means around it. And that part of the process, I wanted people to go, so with the programming project was to go, well, how did David do it? How did we get there? How did we make it look like that?
Well, I think from my standpoint, when David was the brainchild of this programming project and brought a lot of this work forward. And I think that's what was exciting to me about it, was exactly that, like, solving how you get it to where it needs to be. And again, with the amazing documentation that the show already had, and luckily it came into Augmented very easily. It's a great thing to be able to sort of play and unravel those things like you might do out on the road.
Yeah, it was fun to, as I said, I get to look at the conventional documentation because it's something that I would never normally touch. Right? I mean, they do it. I mean, you know what I mean? Or it's done before I'm doing something else. So me sitting there literally focusing that downlight system, I was like, you know what I mean? It was an interesting process. I'm like, really? I got to do a shutter cut here? That was shutter cut? Who knew that? You know what I mean? It was like, yeah, it was fun. And that was at that moment of, oh, this could be fun for someone else to do. Because I learned a lot doing it.
I think
I'll just say, yeah, go ahead, Ray.
Oh, just the run, gorgeous. Like this, people keep asking, can you do a rendering? And we've been through for corporate events, everything, and nothing. These renderings, I could give this to a client. These are gorgeous renderings, and I think that on the creative side, on our end, that this is important for us, that we can actually start building the show. And I can have a client with me, and they can look at this, or a director, and they would be like, oh, okay, that's what it's going to look like. That's great. This is that is something that no one's been able to achieve yet. I think.
Well, we kind of had a little joke when David and I were chatting it in pulling this together, which was, ETC has been very, very vocal about, like, it's a programming tool first. The graphics will improve over time, but right now that's not really where we're focused. And David sent over some of those screen captures, and I was like, well, hot damn, like you, I mean, it is a beautiful design to begin with, and it just makes our stuff look really good too. So,
Well, and that's what I was going to say, Nick, is I actually hadn't been up on the bandwagon about Augment that much, so I started really learning about it while Dave was putting this together and while he was sending me stuff. And I was very excited about it. And like Dave knows, I don't always, on new projects, I'm not always crazy about doing previs unless I think we really know what we're going to be getting into. Because a lot of the time there's a lot of really unknown things, definitely on a project that we've done it before, or in a situation where you have zero time and you're forced into previs, then that's a different story. But I was so excited about the way this looked, and even though it's just a programming tool, I was like, oh, Dave, this project, let's do it.
Right.
Very good. Howell, do you have any final thoughts on that, or have you? I don't know how much you've played with it since it's kind of new, but
just back to the whole technology. It's a new tool. It's going to be great for designers, even like for clients or show and directors. I mean, it's just another layer for a designer to have at their hands. So I think it's very effective. It's going to be a significant new tool. Totally.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to see how it gets taken up. And I think what we've learned over years of console development, and Ann and Lowell can attest to this, is that like what we think people are going to do with it, they're going to do some completely other stuff with it, and that's going to be great too. So it'll be interesting to see how it gets adopted.
You guys are making me blush over here.
Well, no, and Nick, we wanted to actually, we were really interested to see what people came up with as far as making it look better. You know what I mean? That was exciting to me. As I already saw on Poster online, there was someone who posted stuff, and he was hitting the cues with with one of the numbers that was in the show. You know what I mean? So it was great. People are already kind of, trying to, oh, how can I simply that? You know what I mean? How can I, you know what I mean? They're playing along with the show and going, oh, yeah, I'm hitting the cues. Here I am. Look at this guy. And it was really exciting to see. So I was like, well, let's push it. Let's everyone that they can post their stuff. They can make it look better. You know what I mean? Then post it.
The amount of posts I've seen with a picture of an augmented screen and a Disney Plus screenshot.
That was it. Yeah. Yeah. They're playing along with Disney Plus. They're like hitting the cues. It was great. It was pretty funny.
Well, and again, I think it's going to be fun for people to play with, and I thank you, personally, for your generosity and in sharing all the hard work that y'all do, so that other people can learn and get a window into how the Broadway and the touring market works, and learn a little bit that will hopefully help them in their career as well. So I figure we should probably wrap it up. I've held you all long enough, and again, I really appreciate your time. This has been a fabulous discussion. We have a lot of students that are on. We have some young professionals, as storied individuals in this path. What sort of thoughts do you have for people coming out into the world and looking at this fine business of ours as a career path? Who wants to start? Go ahead, Howell. Do you want to start?
Well, I think as we talked about before, technology is such an instrumental part of what's happening now. So for students in school coming out, you've got to stay up with the technology, learning all about fixtures, programming, your drafting skills. But also there's one thing too, and I know it's kind of at a standstill right now, but until the virus is over, when it's over, is making sure that you go to the theater a lot. I think that was a big integral part for me, is seeing a lot of shows, seeing what other people do. You're not there to criticize, you're there to learn from it and to capture, just how other people work and how they attack, certain types of challenges that are on stage, which can just be pivoting, I think, for a young designer to see that, there are just so many examples of that, but that's going to the theater and keeping up with technology, and one thing will lead to the other. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Well, thank you. I'm just going to move in the way my screen is arranged. Amanda, how about you hop on in?
I'll just say, times are challenging right now, so keep your head up. We'll hopefully all be able to be in the theater someday, not too far away. And, as Howell said, he's always still learning. We're always still learning. So that's exactly what you should, or would be great to use this time to do, jumping on this amazing project that Dave helped create here. And, any of the other fabulous online resources that are happening now, all the shows you can see, all the new software you can learn about, just make your own stuff. Like, the best thing I've always learned on the job, and, the best way to learn is to create and to sit in the room with other people that create. So until you're able to do that, make something up. That would be my advice.
I like it. Ryan, you are next on my screen.
Well, I agree with Amanda and Howell with all that. It is a difficult time now, but this is the time where we can use to recharge, being re-inspired. Like Howell said, seeing work, but there's also museums and books and paintings and dance works and Broadway HT, seeing things and just experiencing, also getting to your core, because I think that's where, as a lighting designer, you have to respond to your work. It has to come from you. You don't have a rendering. You will have augmented 3D, but you have to be able to pull from yourself to create your work and respond. And I think that's important for you to really ground yourself now in this time, so that when we are in the hot seat, you're able to move. And fine-tuning your skills is important, and also networking. One thing that Hal does amazingly is we always have a headset at the end of our table for someone to come and observe. And I always tell people, find a designer's work that you enjoy and that you respond to, and send them a message and connect and find your way of networking, because now is a great time that everybody is home. No one is working. So you can connect with that designer or two and maybe have a FaceTime little chat and connect and build that groundwork now. So when things get moving, you can jump into that loop. I think it's important. This whole business is built on networking. You know, Howell gave me an amazing chance back with Avenue Q, what, 20 years ago, it feels like now. And without that little chance, like, I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you. I mean, it's that, all that stuff. It's all about who you know and making that connection and that lasting impression. So I think, you know, for the kids out there, you know, take this time to find yourself, find your, you know, thing, but also a designer that inspires you and really try and, you know, connect with them. I think it's important.
It's amazing. Yeah, thank you very much. I have found that, as you kind of said, everybody in the lighting community that I've ever encountered in my whole career, everybody is incredibly generous, and everybody is, you know, there aren't too many people that are not approachable or not willing to chat or help. And it's one of the reasons why I love our industry and the people we get to work with every day. David, what do you have for our student friends?
Yeah, I mean, I think to build on what these guys have just said is, don't be afraid to ask. You know, that's one thing I think we've always said when we've had, you know, either interns or students come in, is like, we want them to ask questions. Ask questions. That's how you learn. So whether it's going online and researching designers, calling them up, texting them, emailing them, you know, find a way to reach out, I think is very important. And then if whatever opportunities come, jump at it. I mean, I think that's the most important thing that I ever learned, was that, you know, is I do everything from industrials through TV to film to Broadway. I mean, don't turn anything down. You know, do it all, because I mean, you never know what you're going to learn in one format that's going to cross over to another. I mean, if I hadn't have done rock and roll, I wouldn't have got asked to do the Rocky Horror Show, which wouldn't have led me to 42nd Street, which wouldn't have led me to Howell Binkley. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you now if I hadn't have, back in the day, said yes to a rock and roll show. So do it all. Do as much as you can. My advice.
All right, David, you asked for questions. I want to ask one just because I saw this come in and I think it's a funny question. Do you have a favorite macro?
Favorite macro? Do I have a favorite macro? I probably do. I would say it would be one of my query macros. I would say it would be either query color or query preset, because it would be the what you know, change that color, or what color is that, you know, that light that's down there in red. So having when query was brought in, that was, like, to me, a lifesaver. So query preset, I had macros that query presets and query color, I think, are my two favorite.
Further one say, what's your favorite macro? The one that I need right now. Which yes. I think is also a really good answer. Well, again,
whatever gets me where I want to be fastest. I think it's yes, yeah, always. And I tell other, you know, younger guys always ask me all the time. I always change I'm changing my format of how I'm doing stuff all the time. Because when you learn something new, you've got to incorporate it. If you don't, you're going backwards and you're not progressing. So don't get stuck into a rut. Is my advice to young programmers. You know what I mean? Just because you never know what's going to come along in a new software version, and then you're tying your hand behind your back. You know, so
Absolutely.
Keep learning. Yeah.
Well, I think that seems to be the theme of everyone is we're always learning, we're always growing, we're always evolving.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good message to.
The quick story would be for me. It was actually it's not a Howell Binkley. It would be a Brian McDevitt story. Was I showed up to do a show called 9, and I prepped it on probably was grandma at the time, and I walked in and there was an artisan. No, it was an artisan. It was a virtuoso. And I'm like, what? You know what I mean? So I'm like, I luckily had done a few shows on the virtuoso, but it wasn't what I was expecting. You know what I mean? So I literally on a dime had to swap my train of thought from grandma to virtuoso. I mean, that was the console was sitting in front of me. I was like, it's not what I really wanted, but okay.
Yeah, for anyone who's ever done that, that's a really big mind change.
Yeah, when you, yeah. I'm like, here's my, wrong console.
Oh,
Okay.
no.
Yeah, yeah. So don't, you know, that would be my advice. Don't be set in your ways. Be willing to learn and change.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you all so much for taking your time and joining us. A special thank you to our folks that joined us on the panel. Thank you all for attending. I really appreciate it. I actually, Joe DiNardo had emailed me. Ken Billington and David Lander and Joe Saint are also doing a lighting design chat today. It's at 2 p.m. Eastern. It's through George Street Playhouse. I don't have any more particulars, but Google it. You can make it a whole day of lighting. So some of our friends over there also chatting about their craft. So feel free to look it up. So thank you again, Howell, Amanda, David, and Ryan. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, Robin, Will, and Anne, and Anne's puppies for your support in this. And yeah, thank you all so much. Have a fabulous day.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Okay, bye.